Let's imagine two players are about to flip a coin. We'll call our first player heads, and he's always going to bet on heads. And our second player tails, and he's always going to bet on tails. And the rules are simple. Each time they flip the coin and a heads turns up, the heads player will get a point. And each time a tails turns up, the tails player gets a point. And the first one to 5 points wins. So they start playing, and something interesting is happening. On flip one, it's a heads. On flip two, it's a heads. On flip three, it's a heads. And on flip four, it's a heads. So naturally, our heads player is starting to feel very confident. And our tails player is starting to think, there's no way another heads can turn up. So here we are at the exciting moment before the fifth flip. And now let's formalize our question. What is the probability that the next flip is heads? What do you think? Is it less than 50%, exactly 50%, or more than 50%? So, to really understand this question, we'll explore it from three different perspectives. First, we'll look at a tree diagram and see the entire sample space of 5 coin flips. Second, we'll run a simulation in Python to see what happens with lots and lots of data. And finally, we'll look at a contrasting scenario to see where things are a little bit different. Let's build our tree of all the way 5 coin flips can play out. Each path in this tree will be one possible history of our game. So on the first flip, which is this part of the branch, there are two possible outcomes, either heads or tails. And we show that with these two branches, one labeled H for heads and one labeled T for tails. So the second flip, and let me just reveal a little bit more of our tree here. There. So this right here is our second flip. From each of these branches, the coin again can be heads or tails. So notice how the first letter on each branch is already locked in. It's the flip that already happened. So if we are coming from the heads branch, we get either heads heads or heads tails. Each label is just the history so far. The first flip, which is this one, and the second flip, which is this one. So let's reveal some more of our tree now. So now we're getting to our third flip here. So we do the same thing for the third flip. From every one of these nodes, so this node or this node or this node or this node, the coin again has only two options. It's either going to be heads or tails. So if we're coming from this node, heads, heads, the first flip was heads, the second flip was heads. So we can either get a third heads or the first flip was heads, the second flip was heads. So the third flip is tails. At this point, the rule is becoming clear. Every time we flip, each existing path splits into two new paths, one ending in H and one ending in T. So now let's reveal the rest of our tree structure. And we can draw in that this is our fourth flip, and this is our fifth flip. And we can start to see the pattern emerging. The tree just keeps doubling. After 4 flips, there are 16 paths. So that's this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And after 5 flips, there are 32 paths. So that's this set here. Each path, all the way from the left to the right, is one complete outcome of our 5 flip game. And we can see that, right? So each of these represents one possible game that could happen. Here's the all heads scenario at the top. And here's a scenario where we could have ended up with tails, heads, tails, heads, tails. So this is where we need to start to be really careful about what question we're trying to answer. So to flip back, we're trying to answer this question. Given that 4 heads already occurred, what is the probability that the next flip is going to be heads? So now looking at our branch, we can see that we've ended up going down this path, right? Four heads means that we've ended up going down this pathway. So now we're at this moment in time. We're standing here at this moment. And it was rare to get to this moment, right? Because four heads in a row only happens one out of 16 possible ways. But now we're here, right? We've already got to this moment. So the probability that the next flip is going to be heads, we can see that from this moment here, there are only two equally likely possibilities because it's a fair coin. There's either we're going to get one head or we're going to get one tail, meaning that the probability of getting five heads in a row, given you've already seen four heads in a row, is 50%. So now we can answer our question with this tree structure and see that this B is the correct answer. But this is exactly where our brains tend to get a little bit confused sometimes. Because when we see a long streak like heads, 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 it feels like the coin somehow owes us a tails. We think tails is more likely now because things have to even out. And this mistake has a name. It's called the gambler's fallacy. And this is the belief that in a fair random process, the past outcomes somehow push future outcomes the other way, as if the universe is keeping a scoreboard and trying to balance it. But the tree structure shows us that this is not true for a fair coin. Once we're at four heads, so that's right here, once we're here, the next flip is still just heads or tails, each with a probability of 1/2. But if we zoom out for a second and look at this tree structure as a whole, there's another probability hiding in this picture. If we ask a different question, if we ask from the very start, what was the chance that we'd ever end up in this five heads in a row situation, which we can see is right here on the graph, we can see that the probability of this occurring from scratch is 1 over 32. That's about 3%. So that's the probability of having a five head streak from the very start. But if we ask a different question, if our question is not from the very start, what is the probability of getting five heads in a row? If our question is, we've already seen four heads in a row, what's the probability that the next one is heads? That is 1 over 2. The gambler's fallacy happens when we start to kind of mix these two questions and we see a rare streak and start believing it must somehow change the odds of the next flip. So here's our simulation where we are flipping a coin over and over again. And in this first graph, the heads is represented by the orange color, and the tails is represented by the blue color. So as we see blocks of orange or blue, that indicates a streak. And in this case, this block of orange right here was a streak of 7. I only label a streak if it's 3 or more, so that's why we're only seeing 3 as the lowest number. In the second graph, this helps us visualize these streaks over time. So we can see that there were so far at about 100 flips, there's been about 3 streaks of 6, right? 1, 2, 3, and 1 streak of 7. And finally, our third graph shows us the proportions. So this is the proportion of heads. That's what this solid blue line represents. This is so given all of the flips so far, how many of those were heads? And as expected, it's about 50%. This orange dashed line represents our question, which is given that there has been four heads in a row, what's the probability that the fifth flip is a head? And we would expect it to be around 50%. And indeed, that's what we're seeing. The orange dash line is also hovering around 50%, which is exactly what we would expect given what we saw in our tree structure. Let's now look at this from a perspective of a contrasting scenario. So far, we've been looking at independent events, but let's look at an event where the past does change the probability of the future. So in this scenario, let's imagine that there is a box with 8 blocks inside of it, 4 red and 4 blue. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw blocks randomly from this box. So on the first draw, let's talk about the probability that I draw either a red or a blue block. So there are 4 red blocks out of a total of 8 blocks in total. And the probability of a blue is the same. It's also 4 blue blocks out of a total of 8 blocks. So that's a 50-50 chance, just like the coin, there's a 50% chance I'm going to get a red or a blue block. So let's imagine now that I do this. I draw one of the blocks and I happen to draw a red block out. Okay, so now the situation has changed, right? So now instead of 8 blocks, there's only 7 blocks inside of our box now. So let's now talk about a second draw. And again, we'll talk about the probability of red versus the probability of blue. So now the probability that I draw a red is only 3 out of 7, which is approximately 43%. And the probability I draw a blue now is 4 over 7, which is about 57%. So now the probability that I draw blue is higher than it was before. And this is only because I didn't replace this red block, right? I didn't put it back in and then do my second draw. I left this red block out and now I'm drawing from a different scenario. So here's the key contrast. With a box of blocks without replacement, the past changes the future. After drawing a red, blue really is more likely next. But with a fair coin, nothing is getting used up. The coin doesn't lose heads or gain tails based on what just happened. So in the coin world, it's a fallacy to say tails is due. But in this box world, without replacement, it's correct to say blue is now more likely because the probabilities have really changed. So now we've talked about our little coin flip game from 3 different perspectives, and I hope that helps you understand why, after seeing 4 heads in a row, the probability of the next flip being heads is exactly 50%, and also a little bit about what the gambler's fallacy is.